The rain over the Hamptons fell heavy and
You're not
cold,
taking my
striking
child.
the lake behind the Hale estate like thousands of small fists. Midnight had passed, but the house was still lit, every chandelier glowing as if trying to hide the darkness pressing against the windows. Elena Moore stood barefoot on the marble floor, 7 months pregnant, rocking her 5-month-old son Leo in her arms. His breathing was uneven, still weak from being born early. She had learned to listen to every sound he made, the way a mother learns fear before she learns rest. When the front door slammed open, the sound cut through her like glass. Richard Hale stepped inside, his tailored coat soaked, his jaw tight, his eyes burning with something Elena had never seen before. He did not look at his son. He did not kiss her forehead. He walked straight to the table and threw his iPhone down. "Explain this," he said. On the screen were messages Elena had never written, photos she had never taken, bank transfers she had never authorized. The words affair, theft, runaway blurred together until she felt dizzy. "This isn't real," Elena whispered. "Someone is lying to you." Richard laughed, sharp and broken. "Vanessa warned me you'd say that." The name hit her chest like a punch. Vanessa Cole. The woman who smiled too much. The woman who always knew when Richard was angry before Elena did. Thunder cracked outside. Leo began to cry. Richard moved fast. Too fast. He grabbed a bundle of plastic zip ties from his coat pocket, hands shaking, breath uneven. Elena backed away, shielding her baby with her body. "Richard, please," she begged. "I'm pregnant." "That's your son. You planned this," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You made me a fool." Minutes later, the rain swallowed their screams as he dragged them toward the lake. The wooden dock creaked under their weight. The water below was black, endless, unforgiving. Elena felt the cold wind cut through her thin dress. She held Leo tighter, whispering to him that Mommy was here, that everything would be okay, even though she knew it wasn't. Richard stepped forward. And in that moment, as the dock shuddered beneath them, Elena realized something far worse than betrayal was about to happen. The morning after the terrifying lake incident should have been quiet, but it exploded into chaos before the sun even rose. Elena Moore woke on a narrow cot in a community shelter for women and children. Her body ached from the night before, her hip bruised, her back stiff, her heart pounding like it wanted to escape. The memories of water, cold, and Richard's face flashed every time she blinked. Little Leo stirred beside her in his car seat, his breathing sharp and uncertain. She slowly reached to adjust his blanket, praying he was warm enough. Her phone buzzed. A number she didn't recognize. With trembling fingers, she answered, still half in the nightmare of last night. "Mrs. Moore," a voice said, clipped and professional. "This is Sergeant Carter from the Suffolk County Police Department. We have questions about last night." Elena's stomach dropped. Her voice came out weaker than she planned. I was attacked. Richard tried to kill us." There was a pause. "We received conflicting reports. Mr. Hale's attorney claims you were intoxicated," and began an argument that escalated. Elena felt the ground disappear beneath her. Intoxicated? Argument? Those words stung with betrayal deeper than the chill fog she remembered on the lake. She clutched Leo closer and stood, fear and exhaustion singing in her veins. By mid-morning, Vanessa Cole had already engineered a press release before most people had poured coffee. Elena Moore, unstable after giving birth, allegedly lost control and endangered her infant and unborn child in a domestic dispute. Newspapers, blogs, social channels, every headline repeated the same distortions. Some included grainy photos from that night, carefully selected to make Elena look wild-eyed and irrational. Her name flew across the internet with cruel efficiency. Inside the shelter, Elena watched the headlines scroll by on someone else's tablet. Her heart hammered, not because she feared Richard's physical strength weaker, though it may have shown that night, but because the world was already ready to believe the worst about her. She had no allies, no family to vouch for her, no stable home address, just words crafted by Vanessa and repeated without question. Hours later, an official arrived at the shelter with a legal document. Elena's trembling fingers unfolded the paper. "Temporary custody of Leo has been granted to Mr. Hale," the messenger said matter-of-factly. "You are permitted supervised visits only." Elena felt strangled by her own lungs. Visions of Leo's tiny face, his bright eyes, haunted her with the weight of injustice. She sank to the floor, tears spilling without restraint. Then she heard a voice she hadn't expected. "Elena Moore?" She looked up. A tall man, sharp suit, eyes clear and intense, introduced himself. "Daniel Wright. I'm a DOJ attorney. I was told you might need help." Elena stared at him, heart thudding with disbelief. "Why would you?" "I know what it's like to fight when no one believes you," he said gently. "And I know what you're up against." He explained that federal agencies were already reviewing anomalies in the communication logs of Vanessa Cole. Someone had used unauthorized access to alter messages, create false timestamps, and manipulate digital footprints. Daniel had noticed discrepancies suggesting a coordinated setup to frame Elena, not just random domestic noise. "But they need evidence," Elena whispered. Her voice cracked. "I barely have anything left." Daniel knelt beside her, his presence calm but firm. "We have more than you think. We just need to organize it properly." In the hours that followed, Daniel walked her through a plan: preserve medical records from the hospital, subpoena phone metadata, reconstruct the timeline, and secure witness testimony from the few neighbors who heard the struggle. Vanessa's carefully laid digital traps had flaws, tiny mismatches, overlooked patterns that Daniel and his team could exploit. Elena felt a flicker of hope. For the first time since the night at the lake, her fear began to shift into something sharper resolve. She looked at Leo's peaceful, sleeping face and whispered, "I will fight for you." Daniel didn't flinch. Instead, he offered a steady nod, as if he expected her courage, not her fear. That night, Elena didn't sleep. Instead, she planned, strategized, and prepared to reclaim her name, her son, and her future. The world might have branded her a danger, but she knew the truth, and with Daniel's help, she was about to show it. The fight was just beginning. Her story was far from over. Elena Moore learned quickly that surviving the lake was only the beginning of her punishment. By the third day, the narrative had hardened. Richard Hale was the grieving, confused husband. Vanessa Cole was the loyal executive protecting the company. Elena was the unstable woman no one wanted to defend. Daniel Wright picked her up early that morning in a gray sedan and drove toward Manhattan. Elena watched the city rise through the window, steel and glass reflecting a world that felt sealed shut against her. She wore borrowed clothes and carried everything she owned in one canvas bag. Her wrists still showed faint red marks where the zip ties had cut her skin. At the federal building, Daniel spoke carefully, choosing each word like a chess move. He explained how power worked in cases like hers. Money shaped silence, reputation bent facts, and when a wealthy man claimed fear, the system listened. Inside a small interview room, Elena answered questions for hours. Did she drink that night? Had she argued before? Was she experiencing emotional instability after childbirth? Each question felt less like truth-seeking and more like preparation for erasing her credibility. She stayed calm only because Leo's tiny face hovered in her mind like a shield. During a break, Daniel slid his phone across the table. On the screen was a time-stamped call log. Vanessa called Richard 3 times, between 11:40 and midnight, he said. Right before everything happened. Elena swallowed. She was controlling him. Yes, Daniel replied, but control leaves patterns. By afternoon, another blow landed. Child Protective Services filed an emergency recommendation citing risk factors. The report referenced online articles, anonymous witness statements, and a psychological note Vanessa had arranged through a private consultant. Elena was officially labeled high risk. She broke down in the hallway bathroom, pressing her forehead to the cold mirror. For the first time, she wondered if fighting was pointless. She had no money, no home, no public voice. Richard had entire departments designed to crush problems like her. That was when Daniel received a call that changed everything. A maintenance worker from the Hale estate had contacted a federal tip line. He claimed someone paid him to shut down a secondary data backup the night of the incident. The payment came from a shell company tied to Vanessa Cole. Daniel's eyes sharpened. That's obstruction, he said quietly. Hope flared, brief but real. Yet the danger grew with it. That evening, Elena received a message from an unknown number. A single sentence. Stop now, or you lose your son forever. Her hands shook as she deleted it. Daniel immediately documented the threat, but warned her the pressure would increase. People with power rarely surrendered quietly. That night, Elena lay awake on a thin mattress, listening to other women cry softly in the shelter. She rested her hands over her stomach, feeling her unborn child move, alive and stubborn. In that moment, something inside her hardened. She was done begging to be believed. The next morning, she made a decision that would terrify Richard, expose Vanessa, and permanently change her future. She agreed to testify publicly. Outside, the city kept moving, indifferent to her fear. Cars honked, offices filled, deals closed. But Elena understood something essential. Truth did not need permission to exist. It only needed patience, proof, and the courage to stand when every voice demanded silence. And she was learning how to stand. Even as the world tried to break her, she prepared to break it open instead. Now, Elena Moore entered the federal building before sunrise, shoulders squared, fear packed neatly behind her ribs. Daniel Wright met her at security with 2 coffees and a thin folder. "Today changes the balance," he said quietly. She nodded, not trusting her voice yet. Inside a windowless room, analysts projected timelines onto the wall. Phone pings, vehicle movements, server logs. The night at the lake unfolded again, but this time without shouting or rain, only data. Daniel pointed to a gap. 17 minutes, he said. That's where they interfered. Elena leaned closer, her breath caught. "Can you prove it?" "We can prove intent," Daniel replied. "And intent breaks stories." The maintenance worker's statement came first. Paid cash, burner phone, instructions to disable a secondary backup at the boathouse router. The payment traced to a shell company with a clean front and dirty core. Vanessa Cole's signature appeared not as ink, but as authorization code reuse. Sloppy, arrogant. Then came medical records. A nurse documented wrist abrasions consistent with restraints. Hypothermia markers. A fetal monitor strip showing distress after submersion. None of it matched the public narrative of a hysterical argument. Daniel slid the chart forward. "These don't lie." Elena closed her eyes. For a second she smelled lake water again. She forced herself back. "What about witnesses?" "A neighbor heard the dock fail," Daniel said. "And someone else saw a woman near the boathouse. Perfume, distinctive." Elena's jaw tightened. "Vanessa." "Likely," Daniel said. "But we let facts speak." By noon, pressure arrived. Richard Hale's counsel filed an emergency motion to suppress the data, arguing privacy violations and chain of custody errors. The building hummed with urgency. Phones rang. Doors closed. Elena watched Daniel work, calm and relentless, dismantling arguments with dates and statutes. At 3, CPS called. The recommendation stood, supervised visits only. Elena felt the familiar punch of helplessness. Daniel held her gaze. "Temporary," he said. "They're reacting to noise. We're bringing signal." The signal arrived as an email marked priority. A cloud provider confirmed retention of a mirrored backup overlooked during the shutdown. 17 minutes restored, timestamps aligned. A location pin pulsed near the boathouse at 11:52. Vanessa's phone. Active. Present. Elena's hands shook. "That puts her there." "Yes," Daniel said, "and it contradicts her sworn statement." They moved fast. A preservation order, a quiet warrant, no press, no spectacle. By dusk, the pieces formed a story that no amount of money could unwrite. That night, Elena sat alone in the shelter common room, Leo asleep against her chest. She typed a statement, then erased it, typed again. Outside, sirens passed like distant tides. She thought of the prenup, the headlines, the threats. She thought of the unborn child shifting inside her. Her phone buzzed. A voicemail from Richard, rambling, pleading, furious. He blamed Vanessa. He blamed stress. He blamed fear. Elena deleted it without listening to the end. Daniel texted once, "Tomorrow, we file." Elena kissed Leo's hair. The truth was no longer a rumor. It was documented, preserved, and ready. And for the first time since the rain swallowed her scream, Elena slept, knowing the ground beneath her was finally solid. Morning would bring cameras, lawyers, and consequences. Elena accepted that cost. She would speak plainly, without drama, and let records carry the weight. If the world wanted spectacle, she would offer patience instead. Justice, she learned, moved slowly, but it moved. And when it arrived with receipts, not excuses. For her children, truth would become shelter, armor, and a future no one could steal again. Elena Moore entered the federal building before sunrise, shoulders squared, fear packed neatly behind her ribs. Daniel Wright met her at security with 2 coffees and a thin folder. "Today changes the balance," he said quietly. She nodded, not trusting her voice yet. Inside a windowless room, analysts projected timelines onto the wall. Phone pings, vehicle movements, server logs. The night at the lake unfolded again, but this time without shouting or rain, only data. Daniel pointed to a gap. 17 minutes, he said. "That's where they interfered." Elena leaned closer, her breath caught. "Can you prove it?" "We can prove intent," Daniel replied, "and intent breaks stories." The maintenance worker's statement came first. Paid cash, burner phone, instructions to disable a secondary backup at the boathouse router. The payment traced to a shell company with a clean front and dirty core. Vanessa Cole's signature appeared not as ink, but as authorization code reuse. Sloppy, arrogant. Then came medical records. A nurse documented wrist abrasions consistent with restraints. Hypothermia markers. A fetal monitor strip showing distress after submersion. None of it matched the public narrative of a hysterical argument. Daniel slid the chart forward. "These don't lie." Elena closed her eyes. For a second she smelled lake water again. She forced herself back. "What about witnesses?" "A neighbor heard the dock fail," Daniel said, "and someone else saw a woman near the boathouse. Perfume. Distinctive." Elena's jaw tightened. "Vanessa." "Likely," Daniel said, "but we let facts speak." By noon, pressure arrived. Richard Hale's counsel filed an emergency motion to suppress the data, arguing privacy violations and chain of custody errors. The building hummed with urgency. Phones rang, doors closed. Elena watched Daniel work, calm and relentless, dismantling arguments with dates and statutes. At 3, CPS called. The recommendation stood: supervised visits only. Elena felt the familiar punch of helplessness. Daniel held her gaze. "Temporary," he said. "They're reacting to noise. We're bringing signal." The signal arrived as an email marked priority. A cloud provider confirmed retention of a mirrored backup overlooked during the shutdown. 17 minutes restored, timestamps aligned. A location pin pulsed near the boathouse at 11:52. Vanessa's phone. Active. Present. Elena's hands shook. "That puts her there." "Yes," Daniel said, "and it contradicts her sworn statement." They moved fast. A preservation order. A quiet warrant. No press. No spectacle. By dusk, the pieces formed a story that no amount of money could unwrite. That night, Elena sat alone in the shelter common room, Leo asleep against her chest. She typed a statement, then erased it, typed again. Outside, sirens passed like distant tides. She thought of the prenup, the headlines, the threats. She thought of the unborn child shifting inside her. Her phone buzzed. A voicemail from Richard, rambling, pleading, furious. He blamed Vanessa, he blamed stress, he blamed fear. Elena deleted it without listening to the end. Daniel texted once. "Tomorrow, we file." Elena kissed Leo's hair. The truth was no longer a rumor. It was documented, preserved, and ready. And for the first time since the rain swallowed her scream, Elena slept, knowing the ground beneath her was finally solid. Morning would bring cameras, lawyers, and consequences. Elena accepted that cost. She would speak plainly, without drama, and let records carry the weight. If the world wanted spectacle, she would offer patience instead. Justice, she learned, moved slowly, but it moved. And when it arrived with receipts, not excuses. For her children, truth would become shelter, armor, and a future no one could steal again. She did not smile, yet something inside her lifted. Survival had become strategy, and strategy was becoming justice. Tomorrow would demand more courage, more proof, more pain. Tonight, she allowed herself to breathe, holding her children, knowing the tide had turned. Even if storms returned, she would stand again. By the time the courthouse doors opened, a line of cameras already waited, raincoats bright against gray stone. Elena Moore felt every step as weight, but she did not slow. Daniel Wright walked beside her, calm, measured, a hand hovering near her elbow without touching. Inside, the air smelled of paper and coffee, the sound of whispers rising like insects. The hearing was procedural. short on drama by design. Daniel filed the restored data, the medical records, the maintenance worker affidavit, and the metadata summary. He spoke plainly. No accusations, no adjectives. Facts only. Across the aisle, Richard Hale's attorneys stiffened, their confidence thinning with each exhibit number. When Richard entered, Elena did not look at him. She watched the judge. Richard looked smaller than she remembered, suit impeccable, eyes frayed. Vanessa Cole was not present. That absence spoke loudly. The judge asked questions. Dates, devices, locations. Daniel answered, precise and patient. Then the court reviewed the 17 minutes. A screen flickered. Timestamps aligned. A phone ping pulsed near the boathouse. Silence fell, heavy and unmistakable. Outside, news alerts lit up phones before the gavel rested. Reporters rushed statements into feeds. The story shifted, not gently, but abruptly. New evidence, they wrote. Contradictions, they said. Elena felt the current change. Child Protective Services requested an immediate review. The emergency recommendation was stayed pending investigation. Elena exhaled for the first time in days. Not victory, but space. Space mattered. By afternoon, a warrant was issued for digital seizure related to Vanessa Cole. Her name trended, speculation blooming. Daniel warned Elena to stay quiet. Let the process work, he said. She agreed, even as her pulse raced. That evening, a knock came at the shelter. 2 officers delivered a notice. Richard Hale was ordered to have no contact with Elena outside counsel. She read the paper twice, steadying herself. Boundaries. At last. Her phone buzzed again. A new number. She ignored it. Then another message arrived, this one from an old email address she barely remembered. It contained a single attachment. A voice memo. Daniel listened first. The audio crackled, a woman speaking fast, irritated. Vanessa. She complained about Richard's weakness, about making it look like an accident, about deleting backups before the idiot notices. The date matched the night of the lake. Daniel closed his eyes briefly. This changes everything, he said. Elena sat with Leo sleeping on her chest, the memo echoing in her ears. She felt anger, sharp and clean, but beneath it ran resolve. This was not about revenge. It was about stopping a lie before it harmed another child, another woman. Night settled. Elena wrote nothing online. She fed Leo, rocked him, and whispered promises she intended to keep. Tomorrow would be louder. Tonight, she held truth in her hands, fragile but real, and knew it would hold her back. Outside the shelter windows, traffic hissed along wet streets, indifferent to outcomes. Elena pressed her palm to the glass and watched reflections blur. She thought of women who never made it back from water, from silence, from men protected by money. She promised herself she would not become a cautionary footnote. Daniel texted once more, a simple line, steady as a rail. Tomorrow we go public. Elena closed her eyes and nodded to no one. Fear remained, but it no longer commanded her. Purpose did. And purpose, she understood, could carry a body through storms, through courtrooms, through headlines, and into mornings where children woke safe. She breathed slowly, counting seconds, choosing hope again despite scars, noise, doubt. The morning after the evidence surfaced, Elena Moore woke to a world that suddenly pretended to care. News vans lined the street, reporters murmured, and strangers debated her life as if it were entertainment. She dressed quietly, fed Leo, and prepared herself to face noise with discipline, patience, and control. Not anger, not tears, but steady focus carried her forward. Daniel Wright arrived with updates and caution. He warned that public sympathy could flip without warning. The wealthy did not fall quickly. They dragged others down first. Elena nodded, understanding survival now required restraint. Today, Vanessa Cole would speak. Cameras would listen. Lies would sound smooth, practiced, and convincing. Elena reminded herself truth was quieter, heavier, and impossible to erase. At noon, Vanessa stepped before microphones, elegant and composed. She expressed concern, sorrow, and confusion. She spoke of mental health, postpartum instability, and misunderstandings. Each sentence felt rehearsed, shaped to protect Richard Hale. Elena watched from a small room, hands clenched, heart steady. Daniel muted the screen. "This is bait," he said. "She wants you emotional." Elena inhaled, exhaled, silent. That afternoon, subpoenas landed. Financial records, phone data, travel logs. Vanessa's confidence cracked first. Her lawyer requested delays, extensions, privacy protections. The judge denied them. Evidence stacked neatly, date aligned with date. The voice memo circulated quietly among investigators. A decision followed. Vanessa Cole was now a person of interest. Elena closed her eyes. Justice felt closer, sharper, undeniable, real. Richard responded badly. He called investors, demanded loyalty, threatened lawsuits. His voice shook during a private call intercepted by warrant. "She ruined me," he said. "I just wanted it quiet." The words spread through legal channels. Daniel listened twice, careful. "That's consciousness of guilt," he said. Elena felt something break. The man she married was gone. Only consequence remained ahead. That night, threats escalated. Anonymous messages promised ruin, disappearance, silence. Elena changed numbers, routines, shelters. Fear crept close again. She held Leo longer, counting breaths, memorizing warmth. Daniel arranged protection, quiet but firm. "They're losing," he said. "This is what it looks like." Elena nodded, trusting him without question now. She would not retreat. Not again. Her children mattered. Morning brought court. Vanessa arrived pale, guarded, flanked by counsel. Elena walked past her without looking. Inside, the judge reviewed warrants, statements, timelines. Vanessa's attorney argued harassment. Daniel responded calmly, line by line. When the voice memo played, the room froze. Vanessa whispered, denied, faltered. The judge ordered detention pending charges. The sound of handcuffs echoed. Elena did not blink. Outside, cameras exploded. Headlines flipped. Sympathy evaporated. Commentators backtracked. Elena gave no interview. Daniel released documents. Facts replaced opinions. CPS announced an emergency reversal. Leo would remain with his mother. Elena collapsed into a chair, breath shuddering. Relief burned hot. She cried once, silently, then stood. There was more ahead. Justice was moving, not finished. She steadied herself. Strong again. That evening, Richard was arrested. No spectacle, no press. A quiet surrender at his penthouse. He stared through officers, empty. Elena heard later from Daniel. She felt nothing sharp, only final. The man who chose lies had lost control. The system he trusted now judged him. Balance returned slowly. Elena kissed Leo's forehead. "Safe," she whispered. The word felt earned. Sleep came late. Elena watched rain streak glass, remembering water, fear, survival. She was still afraid, but fear no longer ruled. Tomorrow would bring indictments, trials, consequences. She accepted them. Her life was no longer owned. With truth beside her, she would walk forward. For her children, for herself, for women watching. This was not an ending, it was ignition. The day after Richard Hale's arrest felt unreal, as if the city itself had paused to watch what would happen next. Elena Moore woke before dawn, her body heavy, her mind alert. For months, she had lived in reaction mode, answering threats, documents, lies. Now there was a strange quiet, and quiet frightened her more than noise. Daniel Wright met her at a small office near the courthouse. He laid out the timeline ahead. Indictments, pretrial hearings, financial audits, custody finalization. Each word carried weight, but none sounded impossible anymore. Elena listened carefully, hands folded over her stomach, feeling her unborn child shift as if reminding her why endurance mattered. News outlets requested interviews. Offers came disguised as sympathy. Elena declined them all. She had learned attention could turn sharp without warning. Daniel supported the choice. "Let the court speak," he said. "Your life is not a performance." Those words settled into her bones. At the shelter, other women watched her with a mix of hope and fear. Some whispered encouragement, others avoided her, afraid her storm might draw attention to their own fragile safety. Elena understood both reactions. Survival made people cautious. She offered kindness where she could, silence where she must. Child Protective Services arrived that afternoon for a final assessment. This time, the tone had changed. The caseworker spoke gently, reviewed medical updates, watched Elena feed Leo with practiced calm. When the visit ended, the worker smiled softly. "You're doing well," she said. "We're closing the emergency file." Elena closed the door and sank against it, shaking, relief flooding through her limbs. Yet peace did not last. That night, a package appeared at the shelter's front desk. No return address. Inside was a single printed photo. Elena standing on the dock months earlier, unaware, pregnant, vulnerable. On the back, a message read, "You don't win without paying." Daniel examined the package immediately. "This is intimidation," he said. "But it's also desperation." He arranged increased security and documented the threat. Elena nodded, but the image lingered in her mind. Someone still watched. Someone still resented her survival. Across the city, Richard sat alone under supervision, stripped of devices, stripped of control. Reports said he barely spoke, cycling between anger and collapse. Vanessa, detained elsewhere, began negotiating. She offered names, accounts, explanations. The system moved efficiently once the truth cracked open. Days passed. Elena focused on routine. Feeding Leo. Attending prenatal appointments. Breathing through anxiety instead of drowning in it. Daniel checked in often, not only as counsel, but as steady presence. He never pushed, never crossed lines. His respect felt rare, grounding. One evening, Elena stood by a window watching rain trace the glass. She remembered the lake, the cold, the moment she thought everything would end. It hadn't. Survival had changed her shape, not broken it. She placed a hand over her heart and another over her stomach, steady, deliberate. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a future not defined by defense. A home. Safety, laughter, maybe even love, earned slowly, honestly. The thought scared her, but it also warmed her. Outside, sirens faded into distance. Inside, Leo slept peacefully. Elena whispered a promise to both her children. "We are moving forward," she said. And this time, she believed it. Tomorrow would test her again, with depositions, accusations, and long hours of waiting. Elena accepted that truth required stamina. She straightened her shoulders, dimmed the lights, and rested, knowing strength now meant patience, consistency, and refusing to surrender hope, even when fear returned nightly. The deposition was scheduled for 8:30, but Elena Moore arrived an hour early, sitting alone in a quiet corridor with her hands folded and her breathing measured. This was the day she would speak under oath, without cameras, without sympathy, and without protection from the consequences of truth. Daniel Wright reviewed documents beside her, calm and focused, reminding her that honesty mattered more than performance. Inside the room, attorneys arranged files, adjusted recorders, and prepared to test her memory, her consistency, and her strength. Elena answered questions carefully, recounting the night at the lake, the cold water, the broken dock, and the fear that never truly left. They pressed her about alcohol, about arguments, about motives she never had, hoping exhaustion would loosen her words. She did not break. When the questioning ended, one attorney leaned forward and suggested she had exaggerated danger to gain leverage in a failing marriage. Elena met his gaze and said quietly, "I survived because someone heard me, not because I planned anything." The room went still. Across town, Vanessa Cole faced her own deposition and chose a different path. She minimized, deflected, blamed stress, blamed misunderstandings, and blamed Elena with polished confidence. But records contradicted her. Emails resurfaced, accounts failed to align, and patience in the room wore thin. By afternoon, prosecutors informed Daniel they were expanding charges to include conspiracy and witness intimidation. The message was clear. Cooperation might reduce damage, but silence would not save anyone now. That evening, Elena walked outside alone, needing air, watching the sky darken above the city. She felt tired in a way sleep could not fix, yet lighter than she had felt in months. Daniel joined her, offering no advice, only presence, which somehow meant more. He told her the truth often carried a delayed cost, but it also collected interest. Later that night, a court order arrived granting Elena temporary full custody pending trial. She read it twice, hands shaking, then pressed the paper to her chest and cried. This time, the tears were not fear, but release. For every lie told about her, a fact now stood in its place. For every threat, a record. Elena returned to the shelter, packed her bag, and prepared to move somewhere safer with her children. The road ahead remained uncertain, but it was finally hers to walk. She understood that justice was not a moment, but a process that demanded endurance, clarity, and restraint. Tomorrow would bring more hearings, more scrutiny, and more attempts to rewrite what had already been proven. Elena accepted that weight without resentment, knowing survival had taught her how to carry it. She buckled Leo into his seat, whispered a promise, and stepped forward into the next chapter. Behind her, powerful people recalculated risks, alliances shifted quietly, and the machinery of accountability turned. Elena did not look back. She focused on breath, on steps, on the steady certainty that truth, once spoken, could not be returned to silence. The city moved around her, loud and indifferent, but she moved with intention, carrying hard-won clarity. This was how stories truly changed, not with spectacle, but with persistence, evidence, and time. Elena knew the trial would test her again, yet she felt ready, grounded, and unafraid to continue. For the first time since the lake, her future felt open, earned, and real. She held that thought close, like armor, and walked on without hesitation. The truth had a cost, but it also gave her back everything worth keeping. That knowledge carried her forward into morning. The courtroom felt colder than Elena Moore expected, even before proceedings began. She sat straight, hands folded, eyes forward, aware of every movement around her. This was not the final trial, but it mattered just as much. Today, the judge would decide which evidence lived and which died. Daniel Wright leaned close and whispered reminders. Speak only when asked, breathe before answering, let silence work. Elena nodded. She had learned silence could be strength when truth stood firm. Across the room, Richard Hale entered in cuffs, flanked by officers. He looked thinner, older, his confidence stripped away. For a moment, his eyes met Elena's. He opened his mouth, then closed it, realizing there was nothing left to say. Elena looked away. She did not need closure from him anymore. The hearing began. Defense attorneys argued aggressively, claiming evidence was mishandled, statements coerced, emotions inflamed by media pressure. They painted a picture of chaos, hoping confusion would blur responsibility. Elena listened without reacting. She had lived that chaos. She would not let it rewrite her reality. Daniel stood and responded point by point. He referenced timestamps, warrants, medical documentation, and witness credibility. His voice remained calm, almost gentle, which made the facts sound heavier. The courtroom listened. Even the judge leaned forward, attentive. When Vanessa Cole's recorded memo played, tension tightened the air. Her voice, sharp and impatient, filled the room. There was no confusion in it, no fear, only control. Elena felt her stomach twist, but she did not look away. This was the sound of the lie finally exposed. Defense objections followed, rapid and desperate. The judge overruled them one by one. The pattern was clear: manipulation, planning, intent. The narrative that once crushed Elena now collapsed under its own weight. Then Elena was called. She stood slowly, placing a hand on the rail for balance. Under oath, she answered questions about the dock, the water, the restraints, and the aftermath. Her voice stayed steady, even when memories pressed hard against her chest. She described not anger, but fear. Not revenge, but survival. When the defense tried to provoke emotion, she refused it. She spoke simply, plainly, and without accusation. The judge watched her closely. So did the room. After hours of arguments, the judge recessed briefly, then returned with a ruling. The majority of evidence would stand. The intimidation claims were valid. Custody would remain with Elena pending final judgment. The gavel struck. Relief washed over her in waves. Not victory, not celebration, but confirmation. She had not imagined her pain. The system now acknowledged it. Outside, reporters gathered, hungry for reaction. Elena declined statements, letting Daniel issue a brief release. Facts only. Process ongoing. No commentary. It frustrated the press, but protected her children. That night, Elena returned to her temporary apartment, a modest space with clean light and quiet walls. She fed Leo, felt her unborn child kick, and sat on the floor, breathing through exhaustion. Daniel checked in once more. "You did well," he said. Elena smiled faintly. Praise felt unfamiliar. Alone, she reflected on how far she had come from the lake, from fear, from silence. Tomorrow would bring more challenges, but tonight she allowed herself rest. The lie had lost its footing, the truth stood. And Elena, no longer just surviving, was finally becoming free. The weeks after the evidentiary hearing moved slowly, heavy with waiting and tension. Elena Moore learned that progress did not always feel like relief. Some mornings she woke hopeful, others she woke afraid to check her phone. Every unknown number carried the memory of threats and the echo of water. Daniel Wright kept her grounded, reminding her that silence could also be protection. They prepared for the criminal trial methodically, reviewing evidence late into nights. Elena balanced legal meetings with prenatal visits and midnight feedings for Leo. Exhaustion became routine, but despair no longer ruled her decisions. One afternoon, a court-appointed therapist evaluated Elena for custody documentation. The questions were personal, invasive, and carefully framed to test stability. Elena answered honestly, describing fear, resilience, and her daily caregiving routines. She did not minimize pain, nor exaggerate suffering for sympathy. The therapist noted calm affect, consistent responses, and strong maternal attachment. That report quietly dismantled months of manufactured doubt. Meanwhile, Richard Hale's defense team grew increasingly aggressive. They attempted to introduce character witnesses portraying Elena as unstable. Daniel countered each attempt with documentation and prior sworn statements. The judge sustained most objections, signaling diminishing patience. Outside the courtroom, public sentiment continued to shift. Editorials questioned how wealth had delayed accountability for so long. Elena avoided reading comments, protecting her fragile emotional balance. At night, she wrote letters to her children she might never send. In them, she promised honesty, safety, and unconditional love. These private rituals kept her anchored when uncertainty surged. As trial dates approached, prosecutors expanded charges against Vanessa Cole. Financial crimes, obstruction, and conspiracy were added. Vanessa's cooperation negotiations stalled as evidence multiplied. She had underestimated the trail she left behind. For Elena, vindication no longer felt abstract. It appeared in paperwork, rulings, and official language. Still, fear lingered, quieter but persistent. Daniel reminded her that courage did not erase fear, it managed it. On a rainy evening, Elena felt labor pains for the first time. The timing frightened her, yet also felt symbolic. Daniel met her at the hospital, silent, steady, unwavering. Hours later, Elena welcomed a daughter into the world. Holding her newborn, Elena felt something close to peace. Life had not broken her. It had sharpened her. The fight was not over, but meaning had returned. Elena closed her eyes, breathing deeply, ready for whatever came next. Motherhood, once weaponized against her, now strengthened her resolve. She would finish this journey standing, not hiding. For her children, she would endure everything still ahead. The courtroom awaited, but so did a future worth claiming. Elena believed that now, without doubt, strength, she realized, was built one honest step at a time. And she kept walking. The days ahead would test patience, truth, and endurance in equal measure. Elena accepted that challenge without bitterness or regret. She had already survived the worst. Everything else was just distance to be crossed. In quiet moments, she imagined telling her children this story someday. Not as tragedy, but as proof of resilience. She hoped they would hear strength instead of fear. That hope mattered more than any verdict. Outside the hospital window, rain fell softly, harmless now. Elena watched it without flinching. She had learned storms could be survived, some even cleared the air. With her daughter sleeping beside her, Elena rested at last. Tomorrow would demand strength again, but tonight granted grace. She accepted it, quietly grateful. The journey continued, but she was no longer afraid. Truth had given her back, her voice, her children, and herself. That was enough to face anything waiting beyond the courtroom doors. The courtroom filled slowly that morning, heavy with anticipation and quiet tension. Elena Moore sat with her hands folded, her newborn daughter asleep in a carrier at her feet, Leo beside her, drawing on paper Daniel had brought. She looked calm, but inside, every nerve waited for impact. Today, prosecutors would call a witness that could either seal the case or fracture it completely. Daniel leaned close and whispered, "Whatever happens, stay steady." Elena nodded, trusting him without question now. When the bailiff announced the next witness, a murmur rippled through the room. A man in a maintenance uniform stepped forward, older, weathered, eyes fixed on the floor. He introduced himself as Thomas Reed, former grounds supervisor at the Hale estate. Elena recognized him immediately. He was the one who used to wave at her from the dock in the mornings. Under oath, Thomas described receiving instructions the night of the incident. He was told to disable a secondary data backup near the boathouse. He was paid in cash and warned not to ask questions. The instructions came through a burner phone, but the voice, he said, belonged to Vanessa Cole. Gasps spread across the gallery. Richard Hale stiffened. His attorneys exchanged glances. Thomas continued, explaining that after the incident, he was pressured again, this time to alter maintenance logs to make the dock appear structurally unsound for months. He refused. Days later, his job was terminated without cause. The defense objected repeatedly, but documents supported every claim. Payment records, call logs, termination emails. The pattern was undeniable. Then came the unexpected turn. Thomas revealed that weeks before the lake incident, Richard Hale himself had asked about the dock's weight capacity late at night, alone, without explanation. The room froze. Even Daniel looked momentarily surprised. Richard's face drained of color. The judge leaned forward. Under questioning, Thomas clarified. Richard seemed anxious, distracted, and asked whether a sudden collapse could look accidental. Thomas had laughed then, thinking it was a strange joke. Now, he understood the truth. Elena felt her breath catch. This was premeditation. This was intent. The defense attempted damage control, arguing speculation. The judge allowed the testimony to stand. The weight of it settled heavily over the courtroom. During recess, reporters rushed to file updates. Daniel stayed with Elena, his voice calm but charged. "This changes the scale," he said. "They can't outrun this." When court resumed, prosecutors rested. The defense requested time. The judge denied it. Momentum had shifted. Elena held her daughter close, feeling the slow, steady rhythm of her breathing. She realized then that the fear she carried had changed shape. It was no longer paralyzing. It was purposeful. As the session ended, the judge scheduled closing arguments sooner than expected. Richard was denied bail adjustment. Vanessa remained detained. Walking out, Elena felt sunlight on her face and did not flinch. The truth was no longer fragile. It was solid, witnessed, and spoken aloud. This trial was no longer about doubt. It was about consequences. And for the first time, Elena allowed herself to believe justice would not hesitate anymore. Outside, supporters waited quietly, not cheering, just watching with careful hope. Elena noticed their faces, strangers connected by belief that truth mattered. She did not wave. She simply nodded, acknowledging shared endurance. In that moment, she understood her story had grown larger than fear. It belonged to anyone silenced, doubted, or pushed toward darkness. That realization strengthened her spine and softened her heart simultaneously. She breathed deeply, steady, resolved, and ready for whatever consequences followed next afterward. The defense knew the ground had shifted, and desperation now guided every decision they made. On the morning of the 13th session, Richard Hale's legal team filed an unexpected motion, requesting a full psychological evaluation of Elena Moore. They argued that trauma could distort memory, that fear could manufacture intent, and that maternal stress might explain inconsistencies. The move was calculated, cruel, and familiar. Elena read the motion without blinking. Daniel Wright watched her closely, waiting for anger, panic, or tears. None came. "They're running out of ground," he said quietly. Inside the courtroom, the defense framed their argument carefully, avoiding accusations while planting doubt. They spoke of emotional overload, postpartum vulnerability, and subjective interpretation of events. They never denied the evidence. They tried to discredit the witness instead. Daniel objected immediately. He reminded the court that Elena had already undergone evaluation by an independent court-appointed therapist. He submitted the report again, highlighting findings of clarity, consistency, and psychological stability. The judge listened without interruption. Then Daniel made a move the defense had not expected. He requested permission to enter a recorded call into evidence, one previously sealed for strategic reasons. The judge approved it. The audio played. Richard's voice filled the room, unguarded, frantic, unfiltered. He spoke about fixing it before it becomes public, about how the dock would look like an accident, about needing Vanessa to handle Elena. There was no ambiguity, no misunderstanding, only fear of exposure. The defense tried to interrupt. The judge raised a hand. "Let it play," she said. When the recording ended, silence spread across the courtroom like a held breath. Richard stared at the table, shoulders collapsed. His attorneys did not look at him. The judge denied the motion for psychological reevaluation. She cited misuse of mental health claims as intimidation. She warned the defense against further attempts to re-traumatize a protected witness. Elena felt the weight shift fully. Finally. Not because the pain was gone, but because the attack had failed. During recess, Daniel stepped outside with her. He did not celebrate. He simply said, "They can't turn this on you anymore." That afternoon, prosecutors announced they would seek maximum sentencing recommendations. The defense requested plea discussions. Vanessa Cole's counsel reopened cooperation talks. Elena sat quietly, holding her daughter, watching the system adjust around truth it could no longer escape. She realized then that power did not disappear when challenged. It fractured, and in those fractures, accountability entered. As court adjourned, Richard was escorted out under guard. He glanced back once, eyes hollow, searching for something unnamed. Elena did not meet his gaze. She walked out into daylight, steady and unchanged. She had not won anything today. She had simply not lost herself. That night, she fed her children, washed bottles, folded laundry, and breathed through exhaustion. Life continued, ordinary and sacred. Tomorrow would bring closing arguments, and with them, final consequences. Elena felt no triumph, only readiness. She had endured the worst weapons they had left, and she was still standing. The morning of closing arguments arrived with an unexpected offer. Richard Hale's attorneys requested a private meeting, proposing a plea agreement that would limit prison time in exchange for a confession. Elena Moore listened as Daniel Wright explained the terms, her face unreadable. The deal required silence, sealed records, and a statement framing the lake incident as panic, not intent. Elena shook her head immediately. She had not endured this to accept a convenient lie. Inside the courtroom, the defense shifted tone. They spoke of remorse, mental strain, and tragic mistakes. Richard addressed the judge, voice trembling, eyes damp. He apologized for fear, for anger, for losing control. He did not apologize for planning. Elena noticed the absence and felt clarity settle. Daniel responded with precision. He outlined choices made before rain fell, calls placed before anger flared, and questions asked weeks earlier about docks and accidents. He reminded the court that panic did not hire silence, and mistakes did not pay cash. When it was Elena's turn, she stood slowly, one hand steadying herself. She did not speak of hatred. She spoke of nights without sleep, of holding a child who struggled to breathe, of learning that truth survives pressure. Her voice never rose. It did not need to. The judge listened without interruption. The gallery was silent. After a brief recess, the court reconvened. The plea was rejected. Closing arguments would proceed. Prosecutors summarized a simple timeline: preparation, manipulation, execution, cover-up. They played the call, displayed the logs, and read the witness statement again. The story required no embellishment. The defense argued consequences were already severe. Careers lost, families broken. They asked for mercy. The judge took notes, expression unchanged. The verdict arrived that afternoon. Guilty on all counts. Elena felt the room tilt, then steady. Richard did not react. Vanessa, watching remotely, lowered her head. Sentencing followed weeks later. Richard received a lengthy term and mandatory treatment. Vanessa received federal time without early release. Appeals were denied. Outside the courthouse, Elena declined interviews. Daniel spoke briefly, thanking the court and emphasizing protection for the children. Elena held her daughter, Leo, at her side, breathing freely. That night, she returned home. A small apartment filled with light. She cooked, bathed the children, and slept without listening for threats. Justice did not heal everything, but it closed the wound that bled her life away. Tomorrow would be ordinary. And ordinary felt like victory. Elena sat quietly on the edge of the bed, listening to the city hum beyond the window, realizing that endings rarely arrived with fireworks. They came with calm, with acceptance, and with space to breathe again. She thought about the woman she had been before fear narrowed her world, and the mother she was becoming through fire and truth. Tomorrow, she would wake early, pack lunches, schedule appointments, and live. That simple promise felt powerful. No guards, no lawyers, no shadows waiting outside. Only responsibility chosen freely. The case would be cited, discussed, archived. Her children would grow, unaware of how close darkness came. Elena allowed herself one final breath of grief, then released it. Survival had become freedom, and freedom demanded courage every ordinary day. She knew healing would not be fast, but it would be honest. With each step forward, fear lost ground. Elena closed her eyes, steady, grateful, and certain that the life ahead, though imperfect, belonged to her at last. It would be shaped by choice, love, patience, and the quiet strength she had earned. Nothing would ever silence her again after this trial. Months passed after sentencing, and silence slowly replaced the noise that once defined Elena Moore's life. She no longer measured days by court dates or legal filings, but by school pickups, pediatric appointments, and quiet dinners. Healing did not arrive suddenly. It came in small, almost invisible shifts that restored her sense of control. Daniel Wright remained present, never intrusive, never distant. He checked in, helped finalize paperwork, and ensured protection orders stayed enforced. Over time, conversations drifted beyond the case. They spoke about books, work, exhaustion, and the strange calm that followed storms. Trust formed carefully, built from respect rather than urgency. One evening, Daniel invited Elena to dinner near the park. No lawyers, no files, no urgency. Just two people eating slowly, listening without fear. Elena felt something unfamiliar but welcome: peace. Weeks later, the custody ruling became permanent. Elena held the order in her hands and cried quietly, not from pain, but release. Her children were safe. Their future was stable. Nothing else mattered as much. Life rebuilt itself gently. Elena moved into a modest home filled with sunlight and laughter. She returned to work part-time, helping women navigate medical systems and safety planning. Purpose returned alongside confidence. Daniel became part of their routine. He read stories to Leo, learned the baby's cries, and respected boundaries without question. Love did not rush them. It arrived patiently, shaped by shared endurance. On a spring afternoon, Daniel took Elena back to the park. He did not kneel dramatically or speak loudly. He simply told her he loved her, admired her strength, and wanted to build a future together. Elena said yes with tears and laughter combined. Their wedding was small, honest, and private. No press, no spectacle. Only friends, children, and quiet vows. Elena wore a simple dress. Daniel held her hand firmly, grounding and warm. The past no longer followed her like a shadow. It existed, but it no longer controlled her days. Justice had been served, consequences delivered. Elena stood one evening watching her children sleep, feeling gratitude settle deeply. Survival had led her here, but love would carry her forward. She knew pain had shaped her, but it had not defined her. The life she built now was hers by choice, by courage, and by truth. For the first time, Elena did not look back. She only looked ahead, steady and whole. Elena often thought about the woman she had been before fear narrowed her world. She remembered believing endurance meant silence, that love required sacrifice without limits. Experience taught her otherwise. True strength allowed joy, boundaries, and safety to exist together. She planned holidays, imagined graduations, and pictured quiet mornings filled with ordinary laughter. These visions were not dreams anymore, but plans grounded in reality. Daniel understood this. He never asked her to forget the past, only to step beyond it. Together, they built rituals, shared meals, and routines that honored healing. Friends returned, community formed. The scars remained, but they no longer dictated her direction. Elena accepted that justice did not restore what was lost, but it protected what mattered most. Each day, she chose presence over fear, hope over bitterness, and honesty over silence. That choice, repeated steadily, became the reward no one could take from her. It arrived quietly through trust rebuilt, mornings without dread, and the certainty that her children would grow surrounded by stability, kindness, and love she once believed impossible. These simple victories became her legacy, stronger than wealth, louder than lies, and lasting beyond any verdict forever onward. Elena Moore learned that happiness after trauma did not arrive loudly. It settled in quietly, like sunlight through clean windows. Mornings were no longer measured by fear, but by routine. Breakfast plates, school bags, and soft music filled her home. Safety had become normal, and that alone felt extraordinary. Daniel Wright adjusted easily into family life, never claiming space that was not offered. He repaired shelves, cooked simple meals, and listened more than he spoke. Elena watched him with cautious gratitude, knowing love earned slowly lasted longer. Trust rebuilt itself through ordinary days, not promises. Yet consequences still rippled outward. News reports revisited the case as a warning about unchecked power. Richard Hale's name faded into cautionary headlines. Vanessa Cole became a symbol of ambition without restraint. Elena did not follow their stories closely. She chose distance over obsession, healing over rage. One afternoon, Elena received a letter from a woman she did not know. The writer described surviving abuse after seeing Elena's testimony. She wrote that truth saved her life. Elena read the letter twice, hands shaking, tears falling freely. For the first time, she understood her pain had purpose beyond survival. Motivated by that realization, Elena partnered with a local nonprofit supporting women and children leaving violent homes. She spoke privately, never publicly, sharing resources rather than trauma. Each conversation strengthened her belief that silence had been the real enemy. Action became her language. Daniel watched her transformation with pride. He never tried to direct it. When he proposed marriage formally, months after their quiet commitment, he did so without spectacle. Elena accepted without fear, confident in her choice. Their wedding was intimate and sincere. Friends gathered under trees, children laughed, and vows were spoken plainly. Elena felt no shadow from the past. She felt present, grounded, and free. As seasons changed, Elena realized justice had not simply punished wrongdoing. It had restored her agency. She no longer reacted to life. She chose it. That realization carried her through difficult moments when memories resurfaced unexpectedly. One evening, she returned alone to the lake near the old estate, now quiet and abandoned. She stood at the water's edge, breathing deeply. Fear surfaced briefly, then faded. The place held no power anymore. She had reclaimed herself. Elena walked away without looking back, knowing the past no longer dictated her steps. She returned home, where laughter waited, where love grew patiently, and where the future unfolded without threat. Survival had been her beginning. Choice became her ending. She often reflected on how close she had come to disappearing. The memory no longer crushed her, but it sharpened her compassion. Elena taught her children courage through consistency, not speeches. She showed them safety by creating it daily. Daniel understood that healing was active work, requiring patience, boundaries, and humility. Together they chose calm over chaos, honesty over appearance, and presence over fear. The world continued to spin with cruelty and beauty intertwined, but Elena stood anchored. She accepted joy without suspicion, grief without shame, and love without conditions. This balance became her strength. Her story did not end with punishment or praise. It continued with responsibility, kindness, and vigilance. Elena knew darkness existed, yet she trusted her ability to face it. That confidence was earned, irreversible, and deeply hers. Every morning she woke with purpose, protecting peace fiercely, teaching love gently, and remembering survival was only the first chapter, not the destination. Of a life reclaimed through courage, truth, and unwavering self-respect earned daily by choice and commitment that never again faltered forward. Elena Moore believed the hardest days were behind her, but healing rarely followed a straight line. One quiet afternoon, as autumn light filled the house, a letter arrived without warning. The return address carried a state seal. Her hands stilled. Some echoes, she had learned, returned only to test resolve. The letter informed her of a final civil appeal filed by Richard Hale. It challenged asset division and sought limited contact, framed as paternal concern. Elena closed her eyes, breathing slowly. Fear flickered, brief but sharp, then passed. She called Daniel Wright immediately. Daniel arrived within the hour, calm and focused. He explained the appeal was procedural, predictable, and weak. Still, it required response. The system allowed one last attempt. Elena listened, nodding. She would not be surprised again. Preparation had replaced panic. Court resumed quietly, without cameras. Elena sat composed, no longer a symbol, just a woman protecting her children. Richard appeared thinner, restrained, eyes distant. He spoke through counsel, claiming remorse and transformation. Elena felt nothing. Words without accountability no longer moved her. Daniel countered with documentation. Completed sentences. Violated boundaries. Ongoing restrictions. The judge listened patiently. This time, the questions were direct, almost weary. The court had seen enough. During a recess, Elena stepped outside into cool air. Leaves scattered across stone steps. She remembered nights when fear pressed her chest, when survival felt impossible. Standing there now, she recognized strength not as defiance, but endurance refined. The ruling came swiftly. The appeal was denied in full. No asset changes, no contact, no revisions. The judge cited finality, stability, and the children's best interests. Elena felt a quiet release, deeper than relief. Closure had weight. Outside, Daniel smiled gently. "That's the end," he said. Elena nodded, emotion rising slowly. She thanked him, not for victory, but for constancy. He had stood when chaos tried to rewrite truth. Life resumed its ordinary rhythm. School mornings, shared dinners, evening walks. The lake became a distant memory, no longer sharp. Elena spoke openly with her children, age-appropriate, honest but gentle. Safety was explained, not feared. One evening, Daniel asked Elena to walk with him after dinner. They sat beneath fading light, hands intertwined. He told her he admired her courage, not in court, but at home, in choices repeated daily. Elena smiled, warmth spreading. Love felt simple now, not earned through pain. They planned a future carefully, intentionally. Not grand gestures, but shared purpose. Elena knew happiness was not absence of memory, but presence of peace. She had claimed that, when winter arrived, Elena stood at her window watching snow fall, holding a mug with both hands. The world felt quiet, honest. She whispered gratitude, not to fate, but to herself. She had survived, spoken, protected, and chosen again. The past had tried one last time. It failed. Elena stepped forward, certain, carrying a life built on truth, safety, and love that would not break. She understood now that justice was not loud triumph, but sustained protection. Each choice she made honored boundaries once denied. The home she built was not impressive, but it was safe. Friends returned, laughter settled, and fear loosened its grip. Elena taught her children kindness without silence, courage without cruelty, and love without conditions. These lessons mattered more than verdicts. As night deepened, she turned off lights, checked doors, and rested peacefully. Tomorrow promised nothing dramatic, only continuity. And for Elena, continuity was victory. It meant waking unafraid, planning freely, trusting stability, and believing the future belonged to her and her children forever forward. Elena Moore no longer measured her life by court dates or appeals, but by seasons and small moments that felt safely ordinary. Spring arrived gently, filling the neighborhood with green leaves and open windows. She walked her children to school, held hands, listened to stories, and felt gratitude settle where fear once lived. Daniel Wright watched her transformation with quiet respect. He understood that healing was not something he could rush or repair. It belonged to Elena alone. He supported her by remaining steady, present, and patient, proving love did not need urgency to be real. Together, they built routines rooted in trust. Weekends meant library visits, shared breakfasts, and long walks without looking over their shoulders. Elena learned that peace was not fragile when protected intentionally. She no longer startled at sudden noises or unknown numbers. Her nervous system slowly released its grip. One afternoon, Elena received confirmation that all remaining civil actions had been dismissed. The file was officially closed. She read the notice calmly, folded it carefully, and placed it in a drawer. Closure did not require celebration. It required acknowledgement and release. That evening, she spoke with her children about strength and honesty in simple words they could understand. She did not hide the truth, but she softened its edges. They listened, trusting her voice, believing safety was permanent. Elena realized then how deeply responsibility shaped love. Daniel proposed a small celebration dinner at home. Candles, homemade food, quiet laughter. No speeches, no reminders of the past, just presence. Elena felt contentment spread through her chest, unfamiliar yet welcome. As months passed, Elena volunteered with advocacy groups, offering guidance without exposure. She helped others navigate systems that once tried to silence her. Each conversation reaffirmed her belief that survival gained meaning through service. One morning, Elena stood at the edge of a park, watching her children play. She felt something close to joy without hesitation. The past existed, but it no longer demanded attention. Memory had softened into wisdom. Daniel joined her, resting a hand at her back. He asked nothing, he needed nothing. The silence between them felt earned. Elena leaned into that stillness, trusting it completely. She understood now that justice was not revenge, it was restoration. It gave her back choice, dignity, and peace. As the sun dipped lower, Elena gathered her children and headed home. The world felt open, safe, and honest. She carried no armor, only awareness. That night, Elena slept deeply, without dreams of water or fear. Morning would come as it always did, ordinary and full of promise. She welcomed it without hesitation, knowing she had built a life nothing could take from her again. Peace did not erase memory, but it changed its weight and meaning for Elena. She accepted scars as evidence of survival rather than shame. In quiet moments, she reminded herself that boundaries once ignored were now protected fiercely. Love felt safer when chosen freely. The future no longer required vigilance, only intention. Elena understood that healing was ongoing, shaped by honesty and patience. She embraced ordinary challenges without fear, trusting her resilience. Each day affirmed her worth. She lived without apology, carrying wisdom earned through pain. The story that once threatened to destroy her became proof of endurance. Elena smiled often now, not because life was perfect, but because it was finally hers, guided by truth, dignity, and steady hope. She moved forward calmly, protecting her family, honoring lessons learned, and trusting that stability, once earned, could grow stronger with time through patience and consistent care. Years later, Elena Moore was no longer introduced as a survivor or a headline. She was known as a mother, a mentor, and a woman who rebuilt her life with intention. The story that once followed her name faded into history, referenced quietly in professional trainings and legal case studies, never as spectacle again. Her children grew in a home defined by stability. Leo learned confidence early, unafraid to speak his mind. His sister grew curious and fearless, asking questions without hesitation. Elena answered honestly, teaching them that truth was not dangerous when spoken with care. Daniel Wright remained a steady presence, not as a rescuer, but as a partner. Their marriage was grounded in shared values rather than shared trauma. Love was calm, reliable, and patient. Elena trusted it fully, something she once believed impossible. Occasionally, Elena received messages from women across the country. Some thanked her, others asked how to begin again. She never gave speeches or interviews. She responded privately, reminding them that courage started quietly, with one decision repeated daily. The nonprofit she supported expanded its reach. Policies changed, training improved, systems learned to listen sooner. Elena never claimed credit. Impact mattered more than recognition. On a warm afternoon, Elena visited a local school to speak about personal boundaries. She spoke plainly, without sharing details. The students listened, absorbing lessons that might protect them one day. Elena left feeling purposeful, grounded, and grateful. That evening, she returned home to laughter and routine. Dinner cooked slowly, homework scattered the table, Daniel washed dishes as music played softly. Ordinary moments felt sacred. Elena sometimes reflected on how close she came to disappearing. The memory no longer frightened her. It reminded her that resilience was earned, not given. She honored that truth through presence, patience, and kindness. When her children slept, Elena stood at the window, watching lights flicker across the city. She felt no anger, no regret. Justice had done its work. Life had continued. The past no longer demanded attention. It existed only as context, not control. Elena understood that healing was not forgetting, but integrating experience without letting it define identity. As years passed, the case became a footnote. Elena became the author of her own days. She chose love without fear, honesty without punishment, and peace without apology. Her story did not end with a verdict or a wedding. It continued through ordinary mornings, difficult conversations, and steady growth. That was the victory. Elena closed the curtains, turned off the lights, and rested peacefully. Tomorrow promised nothing dramatic, only life unfolding safely. And that was everything she had fought for. She understood that legacy was not measured by wealth or notoriety, but by the quiet safety passed from one generation to the next. Elena taught her children empathy, vigilance, and confidence, not through warnings, but through example. She encouraged curiosity, protected boundaries, and welcomed questions without judgment. Friends gathered often, filling the house with conversation and warmth. Laughter replaced vigilance. Trust replaced fear. Each ordinary interaction reinforced what violence once tried to destroy. Elena accepted joy without guilt and calm without suspicion. When challenges appeared, she faced them directly, trusting skills earned through survival. She no longer feared darkness, because she recognized her ability to confront it. This awareness became her compass. The future did not promise perfection, but it offered possibility. Elena embraced that promise fully, knowing she had already proven her strength beyond doubt. It allowed her to move forward freely, anchored by truth, love, and unwavering confidence in tomorrow for herself and her family always. Elena Moore woke before dawn on a quiet morning that felt no different from any other, and that was exactly what made it special. Sunlight crept through the curtains, soft and patient. She lay still for a moment, listening to steady breathing in the rooms around her, grounding herself in the simple fact that everyone she loved was safe. She rose carefully, moved through the kitchen, and prepared breakfast. The house filled with familiar sounds: footsteps, sleepy voices, laughter. There was no rush, no fear pushing her forward. Life unfolded at a human pace now, and Elena protected that rhythm fiercely. Daniel joined her, offering a quiet smile and a cup of coffee. They spoke about ordinary plans, school schedules, weekend errands, nothing dramatic, nothing heavy. Their connection no longer relied on shared pain, but on shared presence. Love had grown into something stable, unremarkable in the best way. As the children left for school, Elena watched from the doorway, feeling pride settle deep within her chest. She had built this life deliberately. Every boundary, every choice, every step forward had been earned. The past existed, but it no longer shaped her decisions. Later that day, Elena volunteered at the community center, helping a young mother complete safety planning paperwork. She listened more than she spoke. She understood now that empowerment was not instruction, but support. When the woman thanked her, Elena smiled gently, knowing this quiet impact mattered more than any recognition. In the afternoon, Elena walked through the park where she and Daniel had once talked about rebuilding. The trees stood tall, unchanged, witnesses to time passing. She felt no fear standing there, only perspective. Places lost their power when memories were faced honestly. That evening, the family gathered for dinner. Conversation flowed easily, homework spilled across the table. Daniel teased gently. The children laughed loudly. Elena observed it all with calm gratitude, aware that joy did not need to be dramatic to be real. After the dishes were cleared, Elena stepped outside alone for a moment. The air was cool, grounding. She reflected briefly on the woman she once was, frightened and unheard, and felt compassion rather than grief. Survival had taught her strength. Healing had taught her peace. Daniel joined her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "You did this," he said quietly. Elena nodded. She did not deflect the truth anymore. That night, Elena tucked her children into bed, kissed their foreheads, and whispered promises she could keep. Safety, honesty, love. She meant every word. When the house grew quiet, Elena sat by the window and allowed herself one final reflection. Justice had not erased the past, but it had protected the future. She had faced darkness without becoming it. She had chosen courage without cruelty. Elena turned off the light and rested. Tomorrow would arrive as it always did, without guarantees, but without fear. She welcomed it fully, confident in her strength, her choices, and the life she had built from truth. This was not an ending shaped by revenge or spectacle. It was a conclusion defined by dignity, love, and peace earned honestly. Elena Moore lived freely now, not because the world was safe, but because she had learned how to protect what mattered. And that knowledge, once earned, would guide her for the rest of her life forward. So, the story has come to an end. And if you're still here with us right now, staying until this very moment, then I believe something in this story touched your heart in a quiet but real way. Maybe it reminded you of a time when life felt unfair. Maybe it brought back a moment when you had to stay strong even when no one believed you. Or maybe it simply showed you that healing doesn't arrive loudly, it arrives slowly, through courage, truth, and everyday choices. There's a powerful idea from Stoic philosophy that says, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Elena's journey is exactly that. She could not control betrayal, violence, or lies, but she could control one thing: refusing to let pain decide who she became. Another Stoic truth tells us, the obstacle is the way. What tried to break her became the path that led her to safety, dignity, and love. If you're going through something difficult right now, please remember this. Surviving does not mean you are weak. Choosing peace is not giving up. Healing is not forgetting, it's reclaiming yourself. If this story resonated with you, please take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who might need it, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us keep telling stories that remind people they are not alone.